Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to the Alibaba Cloud AsiaForward Startup Day. Organized by Alibaba Cloud, this event is designed to be a full day of interactive activity and dialogue with Asia's leading VCs, Southeast Asian startups of all stages, and notable Chinese startups to discuss the opportunities in the region's hottest sectors. During the panels today, the guest speakers will share their experiences and learnings from the past decade of rapid growth and development in Asia, particularly addressing the similarities and differences between the business and innovation context of Southeast Asia as well as China. We've actually also collected some questions from the audience, which our speakers will answer at the end of each panel. So do stay tuned for that. So let's get into the e-commerce panel titled Reviewing the Cross-Sector Developments of E-Commerce. Today we have James Tan, Managing Partner at Quest Ventures, and we have Zhao Xiaochun, Partner at 36KR Chuhai. And to introduce myself, I'm Suyen from the KR Asia team, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. So a warm welcome to both our speakers and of course the audience. Thank you so much for joining us today. Without further ado, let's have our speakers first introduce themselves. So over to you, James.
Very good morning or good afternoon to the audience. It's a delight to be here on the KR Asia panel, especially with Suyen. And of course, now with my new friend, Xiaochun. My name is James Tan. I'm the managing partner at Quest Ventures. Since 2011, we have been focusing on an overarching digital economy strategy across Asia. We think of ourselves as a top venture capital firm in the following areas: AI, e-commerce and marketplaces, which we are talking about today, entertainment, finance, food, and the Islamic digital economy. Our portfolio companies include some industry leaders in Southeast Asia, such as 99.co, Carousel, Caro, Glee, and so on. Back to you, Suyen.
Thanks for that, James. Definitely, Quest is a name that is, I think, very familiar to a lot of the Southeast Asian audience. Xiaochun, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and 36KR Chuhai?
Sure， 好的，谢谢大家，非常非常开心今天能跟James 还有 Suyen 一起来跟大家聊电商的这个话题啊。然后我先简单介绍一下我自己，可能就方便大家了解我为什么会出现在这里。我是小纯，我在三社 KR Global 负责三社科出海的板块。然后我们的核心的读者就是中国的关注全球商业机遇的一批创业者、投资人，还有大公司海外事业条件的一些人。然后之所以做这件事情，是因为我们觉得能不能把自己的业务放在全球的环境当中进行思考、对比还有落地，是可能下一代中国的 founder 们非常非常重要的一项能力。然后我们希望给大家提供一些灵感还有交流的机会。然后从关注的行业上来看的话，我们主要关注4个行业，企业服务、文化娱乐、金融科技，还有非常非常重要的就是跟电商还有消费的一整个大的生态。然后我的经验当然就比不上在前线做过业务，然后并且现在是投资人的 James， 然后我可能能给大家提供一些从媒体角度的观察吧。然后把时间交给Suyen。谢谢。
Thanks, Xiaochun. Awesome. Yeah, so we're looking forward to hearing what both of you guys have to think on the e-commerce industry across Asia. And I'm sure as most of us probably already know, e-commerce has been an area with impressive development and a huge market dominance in China. And of course, behind the 20 years of development of the industry, there are several aspects that should and could be regarded as important factors. So let's turn to our guest speakers, to dig deeper on these factors. Maybe Xiaochun, you can share with us first, what are some aspects that you think should be brought to attention?
我觉得不如这样，我先给大家讲一下我可能作为一个中国消费者，我自身经历的这种电商方面的一些购物体验。我还年轻一点的时候，最开始买东西接触其实是在一个叫当当的这样的网站上。然后虽然我不是一个特别爱学习的人，但我不知道为什么我最初电商购物体验是买书。所以然后后面开始接触亚马逊还在中国的时候，我会在上面购买一些3C 的产品。然后我最开始电商购物的时候也是货到付款，就是有人送到我家，然后我把钱给他，他把货给我，然后这样是最初的体验。然后再后来是淘宝跟京东就起来了，所以他们解决了我大部分的这种线上购物的需求。然后淘宝解决主要买一些花里胡哨，还有就是衣服这样的需求。那京东可能解决我贵的一部分的需求，比如说买一些耳机啊、 这个就是手机啊等等的这样的需求。然后在这个过程当中还出现过一些我觉得比较有意思的垂直的电商的网站，比如说像凡客，你在上面可能可以买到一些比较便宜但是设计也还可以的 T 恤，然后也是一个有意思的变化。然后现在的话，那个我主要就是淘宝、天猫、京东，然后拼多多可能满足一些猎奇的需求，然后同时我最近也发现自己关注了挺多独立站的，然后独立站在中国的体现形式，我不知道大家了不了解，就是微信的有一些小程序，然后你会发现，比如说，有一个叫 Fabric 的东西，那你可以在上面买到可能外国的设计师，然后为中国的这个消费者定制的一些这种产品。然后还有一些西班牙的饰品的网站，可能在这个小程序上也有自己的店铺，设计的非常妙。所以，这也是我购物的一部分来源吧。然后，所以总结几个我自己的变化，就是从现金到做线上支付，然后从可能最开始我可以忍耐等10天，但是我现在不能忍耐超过1天或者1天半。然后货物的话，最开始可能以买中国的为主，那现在其实全球的东西我都可以非常方便的买到。然后，并且电商在我整体的个人消费当中是占比是越来越大的，花掉了我不少的预算。对，所以就是回到刚才苏燕的这个问题，就是推动电商在中国发展的因素，然后大家聊的非常多的一个就是跟供应链相关的，然后大家可能对中国的印象也是，世界的工厂从货物从东边到西边整体的这样的流程是非常顺的，所以就是在这里我们可以找到非常完备的这样的生产的能力，就相当于比如说，你做一件衣服，你需要有扣子，要有材料，要有人帮你设计打版、剪裁等等，就这些环节我们在中国都可以做到，所以。你会发现中国的产品，无论是从性价比还是说它流转的速度，其实都是很有优势的。然后之前可能大家还会说，就是中国人不太擅长做品牌，然后但其实就是最近我们也可以看到这个部分也有好转，比如说会有一些新鲜的概念出来，无性别的穿搭，然后你要材料做到 eco-friendly 等等吧，所以。我觉得相比于其他大的消费市场，可能非常重要的中国一个特点就是接近这个非常强大并且完备的这个供应链，然后无论是贵还是便宜都有很好的性价比选择，并且流转很快。然后另外一个就是物流，我觉得也是很重要的推动电商发展的一个因素。然后他们更像是我觉得两个环子，就是电商在整个过程当中带动了很多需求端的这种东西转起来了，然后。同时推动了这个物流的整体的发展。我记得很早之前可能看过，京东的一个采访，那他们从2007年的时候开始做自建的物流，然后那可能就是到现在为止，我们其实也看到物流还是京东非常强的一个壁垒。然后那京东物流也独立在港股有上市，然后那物流其实是很重要的一个。然后其他的我觉得还有一些新的变化，比如说像新的这种购物方式的出现，然后比如说通过直播去购物，然后通过社交来完成种草，就相当于把你的链条延展到了一个更长的阶段。所以我觉得这些都是可能中国电商比较有意思的部分吧。
Awesome. Thank you so much, Xiaochun, for sharing such a thorough observation. I think what you said is very true, right? I think not only has China transformed into a complete ecosystem over the last several years, right? We talked about 20 years, not just for the businesses, but for the consumers as well. The evolution is really quite on a different level. For James, then, what are some aspects that Southeast Asia's e-commerce industry can perhaps take note from China? And what do you think would become a good business opportunity, right? And we can look at things like e-commerce enablers, infrastructure, supply chain. I mean, here in Singapore, we also have quite a few up-and-coming logistics companies.
So I'm not sure if I can do a better job than Xiaochun on summarizing the entire development of China in less than 2 decades. Because the minute she mentioned Tang Tang Wan, I'm thinking, okay, I kind of can roughly know when that era was. And if you recall during that period, if that was the Tang Tang and that was the China at that point in time, Southeast Asia definitely was way behind at that point in time. So Southeast Asia still presents many opportunities 2 decades on. By 2015, which is just barely 5, 6, 7 years ago, China was already the world's largest e-commerce market. And it achieved that in less than 2 decades. Of course, the easiest reason we can give is that, of course, it's the largest population in the world and so on. But that is a very way of simplifying things. You can have a large population like Indonesia or Philippines, and yet still not have the kind of e-commerce transactions they are going through. And a lot of it is a result of the supply keeping up the demand and them having a very virtuous interaction with each other. You mentioned or you asked what are the opportunities when it comes to e-commerce. There's actually a lot, and I know we'll cover it throughout the next 1 hour or so, but I'll broadly just define it as two different broad segments. One is on the demand side and one is on the supply side. And the supply side is a bigger challenge and bigger story for us to tackle over the next hour. The demand side is easier, so I'll tackle it now. The demand side is simply consumers like you and me. What are the things that we want? They could be products, they could be services. How are we getting it? And if we are not getting it, why aren't we getting it? If we are not getting it now, how soon before the ecosystem is ready for us to get it? What pieces need to be in place for us to enjoy it? And if you just go back to first principles and evaluate, along the lines that I just mentioned, you'll see that in Southeast Asia itself, there are just so many different pieces that are missing in order for us to enjoy the kind of convenience, 1.5 days, for example, of logistics that China has, or even getting uniquely priced or pieces of items from Spain, for example. There's just different pieces that at play. If the consumers ourselves don't demand it, because we are not aware that such services actually exist, such capabilities actually exist, then the supply side is not going to change. And a lot of the demand right now, a lot of the changes that we are seeing right now, you can say that it's partly influenced by venture capital money going to it, or companies like Alibaba coming out from China and influencing the purchase behavior. Ultimately, it really boils down to what are our experience when we work in China for a while, and hey, how come China is doing it a certain way that Southeast Asia is not, or US is doing it a certain way that Southeast Asia is not, and can we do it?
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's a very thorough way of breaking it down, right? Thinking about it from the demand side and then the supply side. What are consumers asking for, and can the supply side deliver, and things like that. I think that's a very clear way of putting it. And just a quick follow-on question for you as well. Maybe you can also share with us what you think are some unique characteristics in Southeast Asia's e-commerce space.
Because your audience is very different. I mean, Sun's local audience or KR Asia audience is very different. In a generic media, general media, we will say, Southeast Asia is different because you have different language, different payment, different culture. And that's just a very simplified way of answering or even brushing away that question. But we are professional media focusing on tech, so I need to be a bit more nuanced in my explanation. All the above is true, different language, different payment, and so on. They're all true, but we've known it for the longest time, and it has been around for the longest time. So we need to focus on the possibilities in each country and engage a strategy per country, and now with a hub and spoke approach. So let me just slightly elaborate, and I would like everyone to just put on their thinking cap. Because even though China has just one common language and one common payment system in a way, because one currency after all, even though you have major payments like COP and Ali and Tencent and so on, but generally very dominated by several payment providers. However, in China, if you would generally have Dachi Jingli or large regional managers looking at very localized promotions for each city or each region. And if you mirror that to Southeast Asia itself, you will generally have that, of course, one country manager for Indonesia, but breaking it down further, do you really are able to do what you need to do with one country manager, or do you need to regionalize it? And in the hub and spoke approach, which I talked about earlier, because of the ASEAN Free Trade Agreement that provides for tax-free or tax-minimized movement of many things across and services across our borders, the hub and spoke approach is an approach that we've seen has done quite well for companies or even countries that are exporting from China, for example, into a country like Singapore, and using Singapore as a hub for delivering that across the region. of course, then we run into issues of what's the time between order and between delivery and so on, the fulfillment part. But those, at least at least now you get the products that you couldn't have previously got. And I think that really is one small baby step towards just a better ecosystem for e-commerce for all of us.
Interesting. Yeah, I think taking another look at it is how maybe we can build different hubs around Southeast Asia, right? You mentioned, of course, here in Singapore, we are one. But even then, with some of the bigger countries, like you mentioned Indonesia, I've spoken to some logistics companies who are trying to solve that, maybe last mile delivery problem across the different regions in Indonesia. And then when you think about it, they are an archipelago, right? So how do you get the package across the water to some of the smaller islands and some of the consumers that are looking for specific products or specific services? So I think that's a very interesting way to think about it. I would like to go back to the point on supply chain, right? Xiaochun mentioned it, and I think to some people, we see it as sort of like the backbone of China's e-commerce industry. Maybe from what both of you have observed, could you share some examples on how and why the supply chain is important for China's e-commerce? Maybe Xiaochun, we can start on this one.
我觉得说到这个供应链，我们最近有一个很感兴趣的点，就是也不是非常非常新的一个概念，就是还是柔性制造。然后，我可能后面会说到，就是为什么最近开始关注它，就是我们发现，就是这个东西从大概经历了4波在中国的高峰，然后最开始是大概在2008年前后，然后可能就是这个东西出现在了中国的服装行业，主要是以鞋服为主。然后呢，最开始是有一家公司叫美特斯邦威，然后大家可能就是如果不熟悉这家公司，应该属于它的代言人就是周杰伦。然后，他们当时其实是学习 Zara 做快时尚，然后，他们当时就开始在学习这个柔性供应链的一些事情，但最终，发现可能就是当时他们是一个加盟代理的体系，就自营的门店没有那么多，所以它这个订货主动权。并没有在整个品牌的手里，就导致它可能就是，做这件事情本身最根本的那个动力是没有那么强的，所以最后就没有很好的成果。然后第二次呢是大概在2013年左右，然后当时是有这种淘品牌开始起来了，就比如说韩都衣舍，然后我们当时其实也买过一段时间，然后它的整体的供应链，当时我们看到有些数据是单日上新能做到50件左右，然后并且它可以用这种数据的模型去测试，哪些衣服卖得更好，我就多生产一些，然后大概能把这个生产的时间压缩到1周到2周的时间，所以就是小单快返，然后在那个时间是这个样子的，然后再后面第3波的时候是大概在15年左右，然后开始有一些就是我们国内叫它网红品牌，就是可能被一个 influencer 带火的一个品牌，然后他们的就是整体对于这种供应链的需求也是要最开始够小的这种单量，然后要慢慢的就是有多的样式，然后并且要反应很快，然后就开始有这种网红，然后设计师，然后把这种订单派给这样的公司，然后也兴起了一批这种柔性供应链的品牌，比如说像弘毅微工厂啊，有样啊等等吧。然后到了现在就是第4波行情，然后为什么关注这件事儿，是我们发现出海的很多品牌，然后也在就是加入到了这一波行情当中，然后以Shein为主。然后Shein的话是，我不知道大家喜不喜欢买Shein，就是在东南亚，然后但是Shein在就是中国是没有销售的，所以我没有直观的这种购物体验。然后我们对它的观察主要是就是大家聊这家公司为什么能够在全球这么成功，其实也是由于它的供应链是非常强的。就比如说，可能它这个单日上新，然后能做到非常多的量。然后我们之前也听过一些数据，比如说，不知道是不是最新的，不知道准不准确，可能它每天入库的产品能有300到400万件，然后那可能它需要调入的工厂就在几千家，所以它整体的系统的能力是非常强的。然后那我们再回到就是今天主题，就是跟电商相关，那确实看到之所以一家公司能够成功，可能由于它流量端有一些好的玩法，然后或者说它有一些什么样的爆点的观察，但最终归到根，然后可能很长远的东西还是在供应链端的。对，我大概就是这些观察吧。看看这。
Yeah, James, what are your thoughts on this matter?
my immediate thought is that I need to talk to Xiaochun more, and it's a challenge speaking on the panel with someone who's been covering the news for so long and know the history inside out. I just totally agree on she being a very representative, very 标杆性, very representative symbol of the D2C impact. Our Southeast Asia D2C market is really going through a very major transformation. It has many new labels actually emerging within our region here. For example, we got Singapore-based Oxstreet. We got also Indonesian-based Mangkokku, and so on and so forth. So we see that. But the value that founders can unlock in DTC has really grown smaller over the years. Because while we are very open to meeting DTC startups in Quest for those DTC startups in Southeast Asia, there are really not that many. And Shein is really succeeding, not because of its global coverage, but because of the thousands of suppliers it has at any one time for any product. And the quick turnaround time, and very importantly, the quality that these suppliers have. Southeast Asia doesn't have the scale of production to match. Don't. And any worthy startups from Southeast Asia will really have to solve this production issue before trying to compete with Shein. And if any such competitor were to emerge, my guess is that it will be from Vietnam, which is already the world's third largest garment producer after China and Bangladesh. So for Chinese, for consumer-facing brands, the variants that we mentioned earlier, payment system, culture, and so on, means that it's just more likely for us to have local winners than regional ones. And frankly speaking, this just limits the entire addressable market that these startups have. Yeah. Back to you, Sian.
Thanks. No, I think that's a very interesting point that you mentioned as well. Vietnam, right? As you rightly pointed out, it's actually a very big manufacturing market itself. And yeah, to be very honest, in my limited knowledge, I think mine cannot be compared to yours or Xiaochun's. But I haven't seen, I guess similar to you, James, I haven't seen that many D2C startups regionally as well. I think one point that maybe cannot be missed out is behind all these consumer brands, there are also a lot of technology-driven companies that help these brands. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Rhino Manufacturing. I think Xiaochun would know. Right? Yeah. So I when I first saw a video of what they do, I thought it was pretty incredible. It's like if you're a merchant, you can basically send your design straight to the factory, and the factory can just with I guess like some data analytics and other technologies that can really just manufacture the clothes right on the spot, exactly as you had ordered them, right? So I think that in itself is quite powerful. Yeah. So moving on, right? I think there are definitely new trends in e-commerce. As Xiaochun also mentioned earlier, you have things like live streaming, right? And we see a lot of cross-border enablement as well, right? And how do you think these new business models rely on China's infrastructure advantage? And are there any insights or lessons for Southeast Asia here? Maybe James, you can go first for this one.
I think for any live streaming or any new models that emerge in Southeast Asia itself, they can't rely on China's infrastructure advantage, that's for sure. They got to rely on what they have in-house or what they have in their own backyard, so to speak. And if we are talking about, say, e-commerce or new product launch and so on, a very niche, sector-based product and so on, you don't have the kind of economies of scale, nor the kind of supply chain or production chain behind you. And therefore, you are always either behind the curve, meaning taking in something and hoping you can sell, or you're doing pre-sale, which also has its own problem in terms of lead time in fulfillment. You're also riding on trends that are necessarily dictated by someone else already, because those products that were produced with economies of scale were produced with those trends in mind. So I have not been in a position to see trends that have been created in Southeast Asia for the world, or much less for Southeast Asia itself, from within here. But conversely, you have seen trends created in China and then it just go beyond the shores of China to the rest of the world. And that's a challenge that we have. It's a challenge that will not go away anytime soon because we are still different countries after all. So I would say that to just focus on the strengths that we have. Once again, I will go back to the hub and spoke. The hub and spoke approach is an approach where if I'm an influencer doing live streaming and so on in a town like say Manila, and I know that my immediate audience is really my fellow Filipinos within Philippines, but I cannot forget the fact that there's a huge diaspora of Filipinos that are outside of the Philippines that may be potentially interested in my kind of influencing power and may want to also purchase. And many of them actually reside within Southeast Asia rather than further abroad like US and so on. And if I already have the hub and spoke approach, I can actually do it by procuring again from whether it's Vietnam or China or Bangladesh, for example, if you're talking about clothes, and using that to just push my products out and thereby expanding my influence beyond the shores of Philippines. I think that should be the approach that we are taking to tap into our own diaspora or tap into our own markets. And hopefully one day we will have our own influencer creating a new trend that goes beyond the shores of our country. And it has been done before by smaller countries that are in Asia. Korea being the most famous example in recent times. And before Korea, there was Japan, also very big, very influential with their fashion and others. Back to you, Sweden.
Yeah, definitely. I hear what you're saying, James. Xiaochun, what do you think?
我觉得 James 就是已经说的非常非常全面了。然后我在国内的感觉是，就是今年如果大家在聊到电商的时候，然后可能就是在想今年的变化是啥。然后可能今年还有一个比较大的变化就是还是抖音还有 TikTok。然后可能就是大概20年的时候，就抖音电商在国内的这个 GMV 的数字应该已经表现很好了。那我记得当时应该2021年的就是全年可能较20年还是要 double 的这样的数字。就虽然它肯定比阿里就是这样的 GMV 还是不是完全一个量级的，但其实在国内已经非常成体系跟气候了。然后另外我们就是觉得就是 TikTok 会把中国的这一套可能在全球也开展起来。然后我们最近其实也非常非常关注就是 TikTok 电商整体的情况。所以比如说它在印尼还有英国的表现，就带起来的感觉也是似乎在印尼的表现更好一点，可能那边的消费者对于直播电商的接受程度会相较于欧洲的这种受众可能会稍微更好一点。所以就是TikTok 也在开更多东南亚的市场。所以我觉得这个可能是今年一个值得关注的变化吧，并且跟东南亚市场也是息息相关的。
Understand. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about like taking the advantage of user-generated content and bringing that into the realms of e-commerce, right? I think, of course, with like you mentioned, Douyin e-commerce, we've seen some iterations of that in TikTok, especially in Indonesia, rightly as Xiaochun said. And I guess some of the Western countries have caught on to that as well. I mean, of course, we have Instagram shopping now and stuff like that. So it is, I guess, with everybody looking at their mobile phones nowadays, that's a very lucrative way to spread your brand name. Yeah, let's actually look at some of the the audience questions at the moment. And the first one is actually for both of you guys. It's sent in by the startup named Poundit. We'll start with a simple question, right? It's more about user habits. The question is, would the procurement habit of consumers revert back more offline once you think all lockdowns and pandemic-related restrictions are lifted? Maybe James, you can go for this one first.
Okay. So the short answer is yes. It will revert. However, the focus of the spending or revenge spending will be on experience. It will not be on product. Products have already been bought during COVID. I see all of you nodding. So you buy everything you needed to buy. I've bought a new laptop, new mouse. I'm not sure how many other products anyone can buy cars,
Mm.
houses, and so on. So now is the chance for services and experiences to bounce back. In particular, travel, we all hope will recover soon. Entertainment, live entertainment to be exact, health even, now that people are more just generally more concerned about their health in general. So we think that these experience-based services or product will actually experience the benefit of COVID recovery.
Got it. Xiaochun, what about you?
我同意我觉得是那些可能就是必需品，就是还是会从线上购买，因为它毕竟很方便。然后，但是需要体验的，就是肯定还是在线下。比如说，我想买一些香薰的时候，我肯定还是要去线下先闻一闻。然后，包含可能就是大家就是入了三坑的，比如说我想买一些什么 JK 制服、Lolita，然后那我肯定要去诗与万花镜逛一逛，然后这样可能还能见到一些朋友。所以就是非常非常同意 James 的说法吧，就是线下的体验还是很重要的一个部分。
I mean, shopping is not just about clicking the button online, right? I guess there's an entire experience built around shopping, right? Going into the shopping mall. I guess there's also opportunity for new retail in that sense, right? And things like that. Cool. And moving on to the next question, also for both of you guys, sent in by Itaru. I think this is quite an interesting one. How do you see e-commerce players integrating user-generated content in the future? And are there limitations to this path for e-commerce in Southeast Asia in comparison to the sustainability of Xiaohongshu in China? So I guess earlier on we did mention that live streaming e-commerce, UGC generated e-commerce is something that's growing. But do we think is it sustainable in Southeast Asia? Maybe Xiaochun, you can go first and tell us a bit more about how Xiaohongshu works in China.
当然，我觉得这个就是我从我自己的购物经验当中，我总结出来，或者说我猜想大家的一个感觉。就我觉得，就是种草这件事情，随着它越来越流行，然后用户其实是被一遍一遍的洗过来的。所以他们对于广告的识别也会越来越精明的，就是他不可能就是一直就是很傻的，就是被你种草嘛。所以我觉得就是内容真的做得好的平台，然后加上这种好的 influencer，就是未来才能成功。然后大家其实说挺多小红书的，就从我个人的经验来说，就是我现在不从小红书上种草，因为我觉得它的广告太明显了。然后我种草的这样的方式可能是比如说 B 站。然后那有很多可能他的粉丝不在就可能都没到2万，就是1万多，但是他们的内容做得很好，然后并且是很真挚，然后质量很高，那可能它整体带货效果也是很好的。然后我把我自己的这个经验跟身边一些卖货然后做品牌的朋友们在交流的时候，大家其实也是就是更喜欢投这些我觉得可能叫 KOC， 就是它是一个 Key Opinion Consumer， 然后比那个大的 KOC 可能更好一点。所以这个是我自己的感觉。另外就是就比如说做电商肯定还是一整套的体验，就除了你前面的这些流量种草之外，你要把这个货好好的送到人家手里，然后要快要稳妥。所以就是它能不能长效的运营下去，还是要有这一整套的闭环在里面。所以就是如果说东南亚呢，可能也要看这样的流量的平台背后的这一整套的体系是怎么样的。
Got it. So firstly, I guess it's like you mentioned, maybe nowadays Xiaohongshu, the ads are becoming a bit too obvious. So I guess it becomes a question of the quality of content as opposed to the volume of content, right? And you mentioned, people are looking at KOCs, which is a key opinion consumer. So I guess there's also a bit of like a community element to it. People want to hear from the top reviewer what their opinion is, as opposed to the influencer who's trying to sell the product. Interesting. James, what about you?
Yeah, I think the trend with that we're seeing in China and elsewhere, that e-commerce players integrating a lot of UGCs will not stop. I think consumers are getting smarter, as Xiaochun has mentioned, but they will not stop integrating UGC into the sale purchase behavior. Nobody is going to watch a 10-second, 20-second ad nowadays, so they have to just very smartly integrate their products into it. Then in fact, one of the things that we realized over the pandemic, as more purchase happen and so on, and people are just getting more and more familiar and comfortable purchasing, we see a lot more returns also. Because you get the wrong size or the material just didn't feel right. So even as the influencers or even the KOCs are having their increase in sales, we're also seeing increase in returns, which was an opportunity that one of our portfolio company called Posco had. And then in terms of looking at micro influencers or friends, your circle of friends, we have a company called Party Post, which has also actually see a lot more increase in business because of businesses now, companies just realizing that while the key opinion leaders are really still important, nothing beats a recommendation from your friends. And so the companies like Party Post are looking into how we can best or how they can best compensate local influencers or friend influencers, and it becomes a very win-win-win situation.
那个我觉得这个还挺有意思的，因为我觉得就是东南亚的社交，然后或者说社交电商也是大家在国内其实也很关注的一个点吧。因为无论你是做品牌还是说去那边创业，感觉看到的是一些机会。就我其实也好奇，比如说 James， 你感觉就是东南亚的这个你刚才提到的社交电商现在大概是一个什么样的情况？然后有可能它最好的这种体现形式会是个啥呢？
I think the challenges in China is that it is from the outside looking in, it is a red ocean already. The influencers are there already, and the platforms are already there. It is very difficult for someone to want to do something outside of TikTok, for example. So if you come to Southeast Asia, then TikTok is not necessarily the only thing that guys here use. There is also Instagram shopping that Suya mentioned, and a ton of other platforms that are actually being created to tap into this trend. And I would say that this trend could have originated from China and from the larger markets like US, but they are being localized in ways that suit us just because we have not had a local champion or dalao that actually pushes their platform. So the opportunities are there for Chinese entrepreneurs or even entrepreneurs around the world to come into Southeast Asia to tap into live streaming, for example, as a new wave of e-commerce.
Yeah, I think that's a very clear point as well. I think, as a consumer myself, I think it also depends on which class of consumers or which age group maybe of consumers brands are looking to target, right? I personally am not on TikTok very much, and I use Instagram a lot more, right? So I think understanding also the target audience is probably one key thing that brands will need to look at. Awesome. I have a next question, I think for James. In what ways is the Chinese startup scene continuing to determine the evolution of Southeast Asian startups in the next few years, right? And are there sort of neglected proven models in China which have not yet been picked up on in the Southeast Asian region?
I think smart entrepreneurs who are based not just in Southeast Asia but around the world will not just look at the US as a source of inspiration. They should be looking at markets like China. I'm biased because I spent some time in China, but I really think that just because of the way that the Chinese ecosystem has developed so large and so fast that it has set the pace for continued innovation. I don't see anybody, I mean, we got that Tang Ping mentality, but I just don't see that happening when it comes to entrepreneurs who wants to drive something forward, want to drive the sector forward. And so while the D2C models such as Shein and so on not really prevalent here because of all the supply chain production issues that were mentioned earlier, there are neglected categories, proven models in China, which have not really taken off here because of all the similar constraints that we see in D2C. But I think investors are getting smarter and entrepreneurs are also getting smarter on within those constraints, what can they do to still create a sizable company. And the area that we are looking into right now is very much in agriculture and agri-tech because, well, Southeast Asia is pretty much the world's largest producer of core produce like rice. And there are models that we can adopt from, say, the likes of Meicai in China, to replicate here. Maybe at that point, back to you, Sian.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely for sure. I think there are a lot of how do I say, other maybe less consumer facing industries, right? Because we've been talking about e-commerce. That's something that's, I think, always pretty much covered quite often, even in mainstream media, right? Because it involves day-to-day consumers. But like you mentioned, there are a lot of industries that are perhaps more B2B, right? That have a lot of room for exploring and a lot of room for learning. Of course, not just from China, but from other countries elsewhere who might have a stronghold in that industry. And I definitely agree. It's up to entrepreneurs to go and seek out these other models to learn from. Cool. And for Xiaochun, I guess in a way, on the flip side, right? What are some unique areas that Chinese startup leaders perhaps are looking to break into, but they face unique contextual challenges?
我最近聊的比较多的，我感觉还是以 D2C 的品牌为主，然后大家就是痛苦的点其实也挺多的，就是首先就是你要卖到东南亚的市场，然后我很多时候觉得他们卖的东西不太对，就是要么卖太贵，要么就是这个需求可能真的不太适合那边的市场。然后另外就是跨境的物流还是很大的一个痛点，就最近也有在越南做品牌的朋友们，就因为越南的疫情又爆发了，所以就是又完全没有办法送货了，所以就很惨。然后另外我觉得就是大家另外一个共性的可能问题就是我觉得不同地方的人对于速度、时间、效率的这种感官是不一样的。然后你在就是你协调你全球的这个合作伙伴，然后以及团队的时候，就是大家能不能拉平这个时间线，其实就是也痛苦，就是中国人总是要快，然后那个大家就是外面可能就是希望能够更平一点，然后就是慢慢来，我们把事情一步一步的做好。所以我觉得确实有很多文化的冲突在里面。然后另外就是我们有一些朋友，比如说在那边做网文漫画，或者说把游戏，然后希望能够做到东南亚市场去，那他们遇到的问题就更多了，就是哪些文化的元素是东南亚受众们比较喜欢的，然后可能跟中国其实也有很大的差别，然后这个时候可能就得确实借助很多当地的合作伙伴，还有优秀的员工来帮他们引入一些当地的看法了。
Got it. I guess I guess finding key local partners or reliable local partners is a challenge for startups who are looking to break into any new market, right? Awesome. And one last question for both of you, something that's a little bit different. What are the challenging trends? What challenging trends are distinct between the purchasing habits of first and third tier cities faced by e-commerce startups? I guess this is something similar to what Xiaochun you just mentioned, right? You're not sure. There are differing expectations from different groups of consumers. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
好的，我觉得首先我想到就是那个各个就是比如说五环内人跟五环外人，或者说一线城市、二线城市、三线城市，就大家那个就是我买一个东西那个决策的 trigger 不太一样，就是有一些是性价比，然后有一些是我觉得这个品牌很好，我要为它这个品牌概念去付费，然后还有很多其实是像刚才James 提到的，那可能我需要社区的某一个就是我关系很好的人来给我推荐，然后我就很愿意购买。然后这个我也见到过，比如说我村里面的朋友们，然后他们就很喜欢，你给我推荐这个，然后我很好，我就愿意买。然后这个我觉得可能是第一个点吧。然后除了这个之外，就是如果拿中国举例，就是基础设施方面确实还有一些不太一样的地方，然后所以从物流的时效啊，然后还有这种便利性方向还是有一些差别的。最根本的可能还有一些，比如说大家放在电商上面的预算可能也不太一样。
Got it. James, what do you think?
So the question was challenging trends, maybe the distinct between the purchasing habits of first and third tier cities.
Yeah.
I think if you go back to what I said earlier about the recovery of COVID recovery, that we are going to see a lot more purchase of products, physical products, rather than physical products have already been done, and now we are looking for more in terms of services and so on. Then you are looking at a lot more local experience, and you will see in China we'll call it D3. You just push a lot more localized, localized products or localized experience, and therefore the method of doing so will differ very much between the first and the third tier city, for example. That also requires significantly a lot more investments in putting those local assets there to promote those services.
Understood. All right. And I think that's actually all the time we have for today's e-commerce panel. Of course, thank you once again to our speakers, Xiaochun and James, for joining us today and for taking the time out to share such in-depth insights. I mean, I think I've learned quite a bit from this panel, and I hope our audience has as well. So to our audience, we hope you'll stick around for the rest of the day's activities. If not, we hope to see you again soon. Thank you once again, James and Xiaochun, for sharing your thoughts with us. I hope to see you guys again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.